You know what's funny? Most people who push love away think they're protecting themselves. They'll tell you, I just don't want to get hurt. Or, I need my space. Or my personal favorite, I'm just not ready for something serious right now. But if we peel back the layers, what's really happening? It's not about freedom. It's about ego. See, choosing ego over happiness looks like this. You're too proud to admit you care. You're too scared to say, I need you. You'd rather walk away than risk rejection. And in the moment that ego feels powerful, you feel safe. You feel like you've got the upper hand. But here's the kicker: ego gives you control today and regret tomorrow. Because happiness requires vulnerability. It requires saying, this person matters to me. They could hurt me, but I'm going to show up anyway. And avoidants hate that feeling. They hate not being in control. So they trade short-term safety for long-term loneliness. They trade being right for being loved. They trade pride for peace. And years later, when they see the one who got away living their best life, they don't remember how safe they felt. They remember the moment their ego won and happiness lost. So here's the challenge. Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy? Because at the end of the day, ego never warms your bed at night. Ego doesn't hug you when you're broken. Ego doesn't build a life with you. Happiness does, but only if you choose it over pride. When someone avoids intimacy or closeness, they rarely admit to themselves what's really going on. On the surface, it looks like independence, self-sufficiency, or simply having high standards. But beneath that surface, what's really happening is ego disguising itself as protection. Ego whispers, don't show too much interest. Don't let them know you care. Don't give them the power to hurt you. It dresses itself up as wisdom, as strength, as caution. In reality, it's fear in a shiny suit. Think about it. When you truly care about someone, you're automatically exposed. Suddenly, your mood depends on how much they respond. Your self-esteem can wobble if they pull back, and your heart is on the line. For an avoidant, that exposure feels unbearable. So instead of leaning in, they lean back. Instead of saying, I miss you, they say nothing. Instead of admitting, I want to see you, they pretend they're busy. It's not that they don't feel love. It's that admitting it makes them feel weak. The ego cannot tolerate weakness. So the avoidant convinces themselves that what they're doing is smart. They call it keeping boundaries. They say they're protecting their peace when really they're protecting their pride. Because if they reach out first and the other person doesn't respond, they'll feel humiliated. If they let down their walls and the relationship doesn't last, they'll feel foolish. The ego is allergic to rejection. It would rather keep love at arm's length than risk even a moment of looking vulnerable. The irony is that this so-called protection doesn't prevent pain at all. It only delays it. Avoidants end up hurt anyway, but in a slower, quieter way. The regret creeps in later when they realize the person they pushed away wasn't trying to trap them, but simply love them. At the time, though, the ego insists that self-preservation is more important than connection. It convinces them that keeping their guard up is strength, when in truth it's just fear with better branding. The saddest part is how convincing the ego can be in the moment. It tells a story that makes perfect sense. If I stay detached, no one can control me. If I don't show my cards, no one can play me. If I don't get too close, no one can leave me broken. And while those statements feel protective, they're also the exact chains that keep someone from experiencing intimacy. They think they're winning the game when in reality, they've benched themselves before it even begins. What ego disguises as strength is really avoidance of risk. What it disguises as not caring is really caring too much. And what it disguises as safety is really the beginning of loneliness. The tragedy is that avoidants often don't realize this until it's too late. Until the person who once waited for them has stopped waiting. Until the door they left slightly open has quietly closed. By then, ego has done its job. It kept them safe from being hurt in the short term, but it cost them the deeper happiness they secretly wanted all along. When someone leans on ego for protection, the reward they get is instant. In the moment, it feels like relief. They don't have to reveal their feelings. They don't have to make the first move. They don't have to sit with the anxiety of wondering, do they feel the same way? By pulling back, they create the illusion of control. They tell themselves, I've got this. No one can touch me. I'm the one deciding how close we get. And for a while, that control feels powerful. But like most quick fixes, the cost shows up later, and it usually shows up in the form of regret. The human heart doesn't want control as much as it wants connection. Control is satisfying to the ego, but connection is what satisfies the soul. An avoidant, however, thinks that if they keep the upper hand, they'll be safe. They'll never be caught off guard, never be rejected, never be the one left behind. What they don't see is that by protecting themselves so fiercely, they're also blocking out the very happiness they're craving. You can't fall in love and still be holding on to the steering wheel with white knuckles. Love requires letting go, and letting go terrifies the avoidant. So what happens? They choose safety in the present moment. They withhold their feelings. They act indifferent. They stay in control. And it works for a while. They don't feel exposed. They don't feel needy. They don't feel like they're giving someone else the power to wound them. But fast forward, and they often end up in a situation where the person they cared about no longer feels seen, no longer feels chosen, no longer feels like it's worth staying. That's when regret starts to sink in. The irony is that the avoidant doesn't regret the things they said in prideful moments. They regret the things they didn't say, the affection they didn't express, the vulnerability they didn't show, the commitment they didn't offer. At the time, holding back felt safe. Later, holding back feels like loss. That control they clung to so tightly becomes the very reason they lose the connection they wanted. It's the painful realization that control and closeness can't coexist. You get one or the other. There's a saying that people often remember, not what you did, but how you made them feel. When someone is consistently distant, cool, or guarded, the other person feels unimportant. They feel like love is one-sided. Eventually, they stop trying, and when they stop, the avoidant is left with silence. Silence that once felt like safety, but now feels like emptiness. That's the cruel trade off of choosing ego. It works in the short term, but destroys the very thing they were hoping to preserve in the long term. Avoidants often find themselves looking back at relationships with the same thought. I should have said more. I should have done more. I should have shown them how much I actually cared. But they didn't, because in the moment, the ego convinced them that staying in control was the smarter move. And that's why control may win today, but it's regret that always wins tomorrow. Happiness is never free. It always asks for a price, and that price is vulnerability. The moment you decide to truly connect with someone, you sign up for the possibility of being hurt. There's no way around it. To love is to expose yourself, to let someone see the parts of you that aren't polished, the parts that could be judged, rejected, or ignored. For someone who leans avoidant, that cost feels unbearable. They want the reward of happiness without paying the price. They want the intimacy without the risk. But life doesn't work that way, and relationships certainly don't. When you let someone in, you're making an unspoken agreement. I trust you enough to hand you my heart, knowing you could drop it. That act of trust is what creates closeness. It's not in the perfect words or flawless behavior. It's in the willingness to be real, to admit when you're scared, to confess when you need them, to reveal that you're not invincible. That's what allows another person to feel safe enough to do the same. Vulnerability creates the bridge where two people can actually meet. Without it, the relationship becomes a performance, a game of masks where neither person feels truly seen. Avoidants fear that kind of exposure. To them, showing need or desire feels like weakness. If they say, I miss you, and it isn't reciprocated, they'll feel small. If they show affection and it isn't returned, they'll feel foolish. If they admit commitment and the other person doesn't match it, they'll feel rejected. So they stay behind their walls, convinced they're safer there. What they don't realize is that the wall doesn't just keep pain out, it keeps joy out too. You cannot selectively numb feelings. By numbing fear and sadness, they also numb excitement, intimacy, and love. The truth is, every fulfilling relationship has moments of discomfort. There will always be risks, the risk of rejection, the risk of conflict, the risk of heartbreak. But avoiding risk isn't the same as avoiding pain. It's just avoiding happiness. Vulnerability is scary because it strips away the illusion of control. It's saying, here I am, flaws and all, and I hope you'll accept me. That's terrifying, but it's also the only path to love that feels real. Think of the moments that define closeness in a relationship. They're not the ones where everything looked perfect. They're the ones where you broke down and your partner stayed. The times you admitted fear and they reassured you. The moments you dared to say, I love you, first, and it deepened the bond instead of breaking it. Those moments only exist because someone was brave enough to be vulnerable. Without that, there's no foundation, just two people circling each other, waiting for the other to go first. Happiness belongs to those who risk it. Vulnerability is the gateway, and it will never feel comfortable. But it's the discomfort that makes the joy possible. To love is to be open to hurt, but to avoid that openness is to guarantee emptiness. That's why vulnerability isn't optional. It's the toll you pay for the road to happiness. Pride is one of the most seductive forces in relationships because it convinces people they're winning even as they're slowly losing everything that matters. For someone who struggles with avoidance, pride says, don't chase, don't reach out, don't let them think you need them. It whispers, if they want you, they'll prove it. You don't have to show your cards first. And in the moment, that feels empowering. It feels like they're protecting themselves from being too exposed, too eager, too vulnerable. But what they don't see is that every time they let pride dictate their actions, they trade love for loneliness. Pride wants to be right. It wants to look strong. It wants to maintain control at all costs. But relationships aren't about being right. They're about being connected. When pride stands in the way, moments that could have been softened with honesty or affection turn into distance. A simple, I miss you, could heal tension, but pride keeps the words trapped. A sincere, I was wrong, could restore closeness, but pride refuses to bend. Instead, silence grows, walls build higher, and love begins to suffocate under the weight of unspoken feelings. The irony is that most avoidants do love deeply. They care more than they want to admit. They long for closeness, but pride tells them closeness equals weakness. So they play it cool, they pull back, they stay detached. Their partner, on the other hand, feels unwanted, unseen, and eventually unloved. And when that partner finally gives up and walks away, the avoidant is left with the very thing they thought they wanted, space. But that space doesn't feel like freedom, it feels like emptiness. Pride can't keep someone warm at night. It can't make someone laugh or share dreams or build memories. All it can do is protect the ego from looking less than. And yet that protection is exactly what pushes love out the door. Being too proud to apologize, too proud to show affection first, too proud to admit fear. It all adds up to missed opportunities for connection. And those missed opportunities become regrets later on, the kind that gnaw quietly for years. What pride hides in the short term is the fact that intimacy requires humility. To let someone love you, you have to drop the armor. You have to be willing to say, I was wrong, I need you, or you matter to me more than my pride. That's not weakness, it's strength, because it risks rejection for the sake of love. Avoidants who can't make that leap end up winning arguments but losing relationships, standing tall in their pride but standing alone. At the heart of it, pride asks one question: do you want to be in control, or do you want to be connected? Because you can't have both. Every time pride wins, intimacy loses. Every time ego gets the last word, love loses its chance to breathe. And the cruel truth is, the victory of pride always comes with the cost of loneliness. At some point, every person faces a choice. Do I protect my ego, or do I choose happiness? It sounds simple, but in practice, it's the hardest decision many people ever make, especially for those who fear closeness. Ego promises safety. It promises that you'll never have to look foolish, never risk rejection, never feel the sting of being too open. Happiness, on the other hand, demands risk. It demands you put yourself out there, admit your feelings, and step into the uncertainty of not knowing what you'll get back. One path looks safer, but it leaves you empty. The other looks terrifying, but it's the only one that leads to joy. Ego thrives on pride. It says, if they care, they'll prove it. If they love you, they'll come closer first. Don't expose yourself. Don't chase. Don't give in. It feels powerful to believe you're in control, that you're the one calling the shots. But happiness isn't about power. It's about connection. It's about the messy, unpredictable, beautifully human experience of letting someone see you as you are, not as your pride wants to present you. And that's the crossroads: control or connection, ego or joy. You can't hold both in your hands at the same time. What avoidants often forget is that ego never satisfies in the long run. Sure, it might protect them from temporary discomfort, but it doesn't give them the warmth of someone waiting for them at the end of the day. It doesn't give them the laughter, the comfort, the shared memories that make life feel meaningful. Ego only feeds itself. It protects the self-image, but it starves the heart. Happiness, however, requires a willingness to drop the shield. It asks for honesty even when it feels embarrassing. It asks for love even when it feels risky. It asks for presence even when it feels easier to withdraw. And yet so many people only realize this truth too late. They spend years choosing ego, only to wake up one day realizing they're alone, not because they were unlovable, but because they wouldn't let themselves be loved. They remember the moments they could have reached out, but didn't. The times they could have admitted their feelings, but stayed silent. The arguments that could have ended with closeness, but instead ended with distance. All because ego won the battle, and happiness never even got a chance. The question is always waiting: do you want to be safe, or do you want to be fulfilled? Do you want the comfort of being untouchable, or the beauty of being connected? Happiness will never come without cost, but the cost of choosing ego is far higher in the end. The tragic irony is that the people who spend their lives protecting their pride often end up with nothing but that pride. And pride may feel good in the moment, but it doesn't hold you at night. It doesn't care when you're hurting, and it doesn't make life worth living. Happiness does, but only if you choose it over ego. So what we've seen is this: avoidants don't really lack love, they lack courage. They don't push people away because they don't care. They push them away because they care too much and don't want to risk losing control. But life isn't lived behind walls. You can't choose ego and expect to find happiness on the other side. You can either protect your pride or you can protect your peace. You can be right or you can be loved. The people who regret the most aren't the ones who risked their hearts and got hurt. They're the ones who never let themselves try. So if you find yourself at that crossroads, if your pride is telling you to hold back, stay quiet, play it cool, remember this: ego won't keep you warm, and it won't keep you company. It only keeps you alone. Happiness lies in vulnerability, in the willingness to say, I need you, I care about you, and I'm willing to risk my heart because love is worth it. That's where joy begins, and that's where regret ends. Thank you for listening, thank you for reflecting, and most of all, thank you for having the courage to look at love not as something to fear, but as something to embrace. My hope is that you walk away today not just protecting yourself from pain, but opening yourself to possibility. Because in the end, happiness only comes to those who choose it. Goodbye, and thank you. It's been an honor sharing this time with you.